We'll get started. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the California Community College's Vision for Success Virtual Summit. Today's topic will address equitable placement with integrity. I'm Dr. Cilia Martinez, Assistant Vice Chancellor of Student Equity and Success, and it is my pleasure to be with you today. Just a reminder that our goal for this series is to help our colleges take action to lead our commitments to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and anti-racism, and centering our students to move our system into the future and realize the vision for success. Before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that you have access to live captioning. You just have to click on the live caption tab. And you also can engage with us using the Q&A chat box, and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible during the live session. Next slide, please. Okay, this is our agenda for today. Today's webinar will commence with an introduction and some context setting from Vice Chancellor Dr. Aisha Lowe. Dr. Lowe will moderate a discussion with our distinguished panel of leaders who will synthesize the theme for today and help us to further our goals of clarifying the student's path and helping them stay on it. You will hear about the difficulties and successes colleges have encountered while implementing our equitable placement practices, and also discuss how the system continues to maximize student access. Lastly, we will also have closing remarks from Dr. Aisha Lowe, and we will end with instructions on how to transition to our networking time. So we hope that you'll stay for that. So again, thank you for joining us. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Vice Chancellor Dr. Aisha Lowe.
Thank you very much, Dr. Martinez, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. As we prepare to launch into this session, this very important session on equitable placement, and as you see here in the session overview, the work that we've been doing across our system to really reform structural barriers and open up access and greater student opportunity. But we know that this has been a massive overhaul for our very large system. And so we're very excited, next slide, to have speakers from across our system, students, faculty, and administrators to talk about this important work. So we're excited that we have with us today Nikki Hatfield and Christian Rodriguez, who are both students in our system and fellows of Students Making a Change. We have Andrew Nickens, who is with the Student Senate for California Community Colleges. We have Virginia Jenny May, as we call her, who is our Vice President of the Statewide Academic Senate. We have Jeffrey Hernandez, also here as a faculty member representing Academic Senate. And then administrators as well. We have Dr. Jennifer Vega Lacerna, who is President of the California Community Colleges Chief Instruction Officers, and Dr. Zav Databoy, President of the Chief Student Service Officers. So a nice collection of both students, faculty, and administrators to talk about the potential of equitable placement under AB 705, all that has been accomplished, but to also talk about the challenges and what they are doing across our system to address those challenges. Next slide, please. So since we have a wealth of time together, wanted to start off with some more individualized and personalized introductions from our presenters. So we will go through, we're gonna ask this question of each one of our presenters, and we'll go in the order that we just saw in the previous slide. And that question is, how has access to educational opportunity shaped your life and influence your life outcomes? So we will start off hearing from our students. So we will start off with Nikki Hatfield to answer that question. How has access to educational opportunity shaped your life and influenced your life outcomes? Nikki.
Awesome, thank you. I'm Nikki Hatfield, I'm a SMAC fellow. And I think when I think about education, I think about how it has allowed me, education has allowed me to see how much bigger the world is compared to my neighborhood or compared to the communities I am a part of. And when I think about my access to education, I really get emotional because historically, my ancestors had to fight for the right to education. And I see myself continuing that legacy of advocating for myself and my peers and making sure that we have what we need. And I can't help but think about my grandmother when talking about educational opportunities, because when she had to drop out of school, but always emphasized the importance of education, and that had a huge influence on me. I seriously doubt that I would be up here public speaking and sharing my stories with you all if I didn't have adults and mentors and teachers who like saw my potential and helped me really develop my skill set and confidence to do the work that I do. And I really recognize how much my education has like had me grow. Like I've grown so much due to my education. And I've been lucky to have professors who incorporate social justice in their curriculums, which is a framework that I include in my everyday life now. So access to education has given me a strong appreciation for so much more, and it has opened up so many life-changing like opportunities. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Nikki. So appreciated. We will have your colleague join in now on that same question. Christian Rodriguez, a student and fellow with SMAC, with that same question. How has access to educational opportunities shaped your life and influenced your life outcomes?
Education has been like really stressed. Oh wow, has been really stressed in my family for since I can remember going to school. My mom and kind of like a lot of other different people in my family didn't get the opportunity as much as they gave me. They really stressed about like different schools, and they stressed about, you know, making sure that I had access to a good education, that I was educated. Not that, you know, it wasn't stressed prior, but like it wasn't necessarily taken as seriously in their generation as it is compared to mine. So yeah, I remember going to school and they're like, they put me into private school and they're like, oh, you have the opportunity to make sure to take, you know, advantage of it. You know, especially my great grandmother, you know, my family lived in Antioch, but we typically kind of commuted to the city just because the schools were considered kind of better at the time. What do you call it? So we'd be going from Antioch to San Francisco just because our whole livelihood was there. And I remember it's just like, we'd always have different people taking us to schools just so they can make sure that I attended school and that, you know, that I'd be there, as compared to like prior into the previous generations. And I remember my great grandmother would always say, you know, always go up, always go up, because like, you know, you need to do well in school, get educated, and you'll have better opportunities with getting jobs and things of that nature. So yeah, I'd probably say, you know, my family really stressed education as a whole, and they gave me the opportunity that they didn't have to pursue it. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that, Christian. All right, let's turn to our faculty now. Oh no, actually I'm skipping. We're gonna keep going with our students with Andrew from the Student Senate for California Community Colleges. Andrew, same question for you. How has access to educational opportunities shaped your life and influenced your life outcomes?
Thank you, Dr. Lowe. I will say that when I graduated and from high school in 2018, I did so with a 2.3 GPA. I immensely struggled with mental health through middle school and high school, and it significantly impacted my my academic experiences in middle school and high school. I loved to learn, but there was something about that kind of modality that just, it wasn't successful for me, and I barely graduated high school as a result. And although I'd like to think of myself as academic, and I love to learn, as I mentioned, that didn't really leave me with a whole lot of opportunities to attend a four-year college like some of my other peers did. And so for me, the only kind of option left for me was community colleges if I did want to access higher education. And I've come to learn now that it was the best option for me. And it has had an immense impact on the trajectory of my life. I don't know where I would be without educational opportunities like community colleges. It was a path to me where none existed. and ultimately led me to where I am today, a near high school dropout. I am participating in a webinar like this. I think that's the real benefits of community college and the educational opportunity that's been provided to me. So.
Thank you so much for that, Andrew. Now we will transition to hearing from our faculty presenters. We'll start with you, Jenny May, with that same question of how access to educational opportunity has shaped your life and influenced your life outcomes.
Okay, thank you. So this question was a little bit interesting for me. I've just recently started sharing my story due to the urging of faculty at 2 recent college visits that were virtual, of course, to San Jose Evergreen Community College District and West Valley College. I graduated from a small high school in Eastside San Jose, James Lake High School, for anybody out there from San Jose, the oldest of 5 children. I did well in high school. I prepped for a university, but I did not apply to go to a university. I had no idea how I was going to pay for it and no confidence that I would be accepted, nor did I want to tell anyone how I felt. So I went to the local community colleges. Yes, that's plural, because I went to 3. I went to Evergreen Valley College, to De Anza, to Evergreen again, and then to San Jose City College before I transferred to Sacramento State University. When I started at the community college, I was thrilled that I didn't have to take math. By the way, my degree is in mathematics. My higher degrees are in mathematics, but I was so excited I didn't have to take math. And I was placed in English at 1 level below. I was given an option to take a transfer level course, but I decided to hone my grammar skills. And so that's what I did. I then took a semester off. When I went back, I took a trig course since I thought it would be fun and I wanted to hone my skills again. And my confidence. Confidence was a big thing. Again, I had the option. Pre-calculus was next, but I didn't need to take it because I'd had it in high school. And this time I went directly to calculus and the rest is history. I had access and choice. I wasn't placed in pre-calculus. I didn't have to take it again, so I didn't take it again. I didn't finish college in 4 years. It took me a little bit longer because, I was trying to find myself, but I learned a lot in the process that I didn't learn in high school, and I built up my confidence. So I just kept going from there. It wasn't until I was a senior in college that I felt real encouragement from my professors as to my potential. I try to remember this with my students and reach out to them early. And so if I'm a little nervous now, I am, because I don't share this story much. And there's much more to it that I haven't shared, but this is a first step. And I thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jenny, for being vulnerable and sharing part of your story. But I think it's always an inspiration, in particular for the next generation coming through, to understand that when they see leaders up before them, that we have stories and we have backgrounds, and we've had similar experiences to what they're experiencing. So thank you for that. I'm going to call you in now, Jeffrey, to share on that same introductory question about how access to educational opportunity has shaped your life and influenced your life outcome.
It is hard to imagine my life without thinking about this question. I started at Roosevelt High School in Ball Heights. There's a lot of gain from there, but one thing I didn't gain was the study skills. It's so interesting. I actually took a class on, for those students who are interested in teaching. I did terribly in it because of my writing skills. Oh my goodness, I did terribly. Like Andrew, I had a 2.3 GPA. I almost did not graduate in my case because of a biology course. Before that had happened, based on my GPA, I've been encouraged to apply to Cal State, but I chose not to. I just really did not feel confident. And I knew from my brothers and from my brother and my sisters who had been at East LA College Upper Bound, that East LA College was fairly welcoming. So I decided to go to East LA College. And again, the lack of study skills was something that was really trying. But I like to tell folks I was part of the 5-year plan. And the reason I say that is because back then it was open access. In fact, one of the initial struggles I was involved with as a young college student was in trying to prevent the introduction of fees, of mandatory fees. And we were successful for about 1.5 years, storming the state capitol. And for me, that was all about educational opportunity. Now, separate from that, in my own life, I had to work full time, and I had the pleasant opportunity to take a English class that I was placed into. It was below transfer. It was a English class that focused on paragraph construction. And before then, I really wasn't that interested in English, whether reading or writing. But that class that allowed us to really get into these classic short stories, it inspired me, to critique these different authors. And also I developed the skills and confidence so that when I returned full time, I was well equipped to finish off my last year at East LA College as an honor student, excelling in the English composition course and 2 lit courses along my path towards poli-sci at UCLA. So when I think about educational opportunity, that's really what it was for me. East LA College helped transform the kind of trajectory that I was going to end up with. Yeah.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing a bit of your story with us as well. Well, last but certainly not least, we want to hear from our administrators as well. So we will start with Dr. Jennifer Vega-Lacerner with that same question. Jennifer, how has access to educational opportunity shaped your life and influenced your life outcomes?
Thank you so much for the question. And I think that is the core of why I am here in the position that I'm here now. In addition to being the president of the CIOs, I am the vice president of academic services at the College of the Sequoias, which I attended many years ago. My father is an immigrant from Peru, and he came here as an international student. And my mom was at that time, she is a high school graduate, but later went back to community college to get her AA degree. So I grew up biracial, bicultural, semi-bilingual. When I was a freshman in high school, we moved to Central California from Northern California to Visalia. And like others, I was a good student, but I didn't necessarily apply myself. So my GPA wasn't as great as it could have been. But in the small town that I lived in, most of my friends went to the community college, College of the Sequoias. And I didn't have an idea about transfer. I didn't know anything about financial aid. There was no way my parents could have paid for a 4-year school. So I ended up at College of the Sequoias. And I should say I am honored to have gone to College of the Sequoias because it made the huge difference in my life. And I think when I think about the educational opportunity, there are 3 people I think about: a faculty member at College of the Sequoias, a counselor who helped me in my master's program, and my professor in my doctoral program. But this one faculty member at College of Sequoias is the one who made a difference, who saw my potential, who encouraged me, wrote my letters of recommendation, and supported me in the 2 years that I was here. And so I later transferred to UC Santa Barbara because of him. I applied to 2 schools, San Diego State and UC Santa Barbara, anywhere near the beach, and attended UC Santa Barbara on Pell Grants and Cal Grants because there's no way my parents could have afforded to send me there. So I was lucky enough to have been supported through that financial aid. And years later, I'll fast forward my story to coming back full circle as a dean at College of Sequoias and now the vice president. When I got back here as a dean, that professor was still here teaching. And I was able to thank him for the influence he had on my life. And I really credit a faculty member at this community college and this community college for allowing me to make it full circle to the position I'm in now. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Jennifer. That is just great to hear how your story came full circle. the beauty of you being back in your community at your community college serving. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, certainly not least, Dr. Zav Databoy, same question for you, sir. How has access to educational opportunities shaped your life and influenced your life outcomes? Zav, make sure to unmute.
Thank you. My story is the classic story of an immigrant who did come to the United States on an F1 visa as an international student. I packed a couple of bags and I was put onto a plane and I came over here. I was supposed to do my bachelor's degree in 4 years. I somehow found a way to make it into about 6 years. And that's primarily because I got really busy as a student who was a student leader and involved in student government. And you know what it took? It took a nudge. And so it's amazing, Jennifer. It's a very similar story to yours. It took a nudge from a faculty member who told me, "What are you doing?" And I can still remember her words, and I will forever be grateful to her because she pushed me into completing and to then applying for my master's degree. And then even with my doctoral program, you know, it was something that I had always planned to do, but it took a colleague and a faculty member to tell me, if that's what you want to do, why are you wasting your time? And pushing me once again to apply for and go through my doctoral program. And so in a very, very classic way, that was Guided Pathways before we knew it as Guided Pathways. And so I remember that. I remember those stories. I'm grateful now for my students who call me years later and tell me, hey, you know, you made a difference in my life. And sometimes that's 15, 20, 30 years back. But I always try to call my faculty member and say, Ellie, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Zav. Just thank you all. I love hearing your stories, in particular, some of you who I've been getting to know in my time here, learning more about you and your story. And already just in your introductions, we've already heard so many important themes. We've heard about these stories of fighting for the right for education and the importance of that access if students are to reach their full potential. We've heard you all speak about education being this life-changing growth opportunity. And the ways in which both students and families are making sacrifices to access that opportunity. And also heard across all your stories how our system, how the California community colleges have been that open and safe place for you, as it is for so many students across our state. We also heard about the importance of access and choice, and really the very important role of faculty. I think that was a through line in all of your stories, that at some point there was some faculty member that helped you to see your potential more clearly and helped you to build your confidence. And we also heard through each one of your stories about the importance of access to information as well as student leadership. So much rich discussion already happening just in your introduction. So thank you all for that. So before we jump into more discussion with our panelists, we're going to have a moderated discussion around equitable placement and AB 705. We're going to pull our slides back up briefly just to talk a little bit about this equitable placement effort, where we are now as we continue to implement this across our system. So I'm pretty sure everyone is familiar with Assembly Bill 705, which we are calling equitable placement, really as we shift our language and shift our focus from compliance with a law to really focusing on access and choice, as our speakers were just talking about, and making sure that our students have the opportunities that they need to access transfer level courses. This was a massive policy reform for our system. No easy undertaking, in particular, given how large that we are. But it's really been a long time coming. As Andrew Nickens always speaks well to, AB 705 happened in 2018, but this effort started in the 90s. really questioning the practices around placement and assessment, questioning our practices around basic skills and remedial education, lots of research, even legal lawsuits that have taken place to push this effort forward. And we're in that place now of implementation. As much change as we have made, amazingly, we're still within the first 2-year window of initial implementation, but we are already seeing that this is a historic reform that really has helped to dismantle structural barriers that were often along racial lines and along class lines, hindering our students from moving forward. Next slide, please. And so what are we seeing so far in our results? We are seeing that while we're still only in the first 2 years of implementation, student outcomes are improving as a result of equitable placement. That when students are placed equitably, their path to completion is expedited, and we're starting to see some degradation of those persistent opportunity gaps, seeing those diminish. So we're seeing more students are able to take and complete those gateway math and English courses, and that's irrespective of their high school performance level before they came into the community college system and across all subgroups. And so as we think about guided pathways, as Zav was talking about, and in particular, our 4th pillar of guided pathways, ensuring learning, and I've started to insert in there, ensuring equitable learning, placement really is the beginning of that process. We ensure equitable learning by ensuring that students are given access to the courses that they need to help to guide them along their learning journey. So we are going to prepare now to get back to our speakers and hearing from them. Again, for any of those who have joined us late, we have representatives today from our students, our faculty, as well as our administrators in our system to really talk about this massive reform that has happened in our system, what have been the positive impacts and what have been the challenges in implementation. So let's have a little discussion about that. So we're going to take down the slide so they can really see your faces as we're interacting on this. So we have a set of prepared questions that we'll start with, and then we have some questions that can go to all of the panelists. Again, want to encourage those in the audience that you can enter questions in the Q&A as well. So we will start with our students and that very important student perspective. So I'm going to pose this to all 3 of our students, and we can, you all can feel free to jump in on this. So what was your experience with choosing and enrolling in English and math courses before AB 705, and how has that not changed? How has that now changed, excuse me? So open that up to any of our students who want to jump in on that first question.
Well, for me, I think prior to AB 705 and learning about AB 705, I was seriously considering dropping out because I just dreaded going to classes that were not transferable. I had a lot of shame I was dealing with, and I felt really discouraged. But just being in the right place at the right time, I ran into a smacker. Because my institution wasn't actually like putting the policy out there, so I wasn't aware of it. I ran into a smacker who was telling me like, yo, you don't have to take these remedial courses in math and English. And at first I was like very skeptical. I was like, yeah, okay, right. And then I actually allowed myself to start thinking like, what if I really didn't have to take these remedial courses? And I got super like excited, and I ended up passing my English class. And I'm looking forward to taking the one math course I got to take versus I think it was like a few, like over 3 math courses I was supposed to take. And I'm just in deep gratitude that like I can now see myself transferring, sooner versus later. And now me, Chris, and my other comrades, we're doing the work to make sure everybody on campus knows about AB 705.
Thank you, Nikki. Go ahead, jump in, Andrew.
Yeah, just piggybacking off what Nikki said about like shame, I like definitely feel that. As I mentioned, I graduated high school, and my math coursework up to that point, it wasn't it wasn't that far advanced, and in high school, I was a part of this program called Academic Decathlon. It's an interdisciplinary competition, and it was super fun because I love learning. But my peers alongside me, those are the students who are taking, 5 AP classes, semester in, semester out, and for them to kind of just move on to the next thing. And when I enrolled in community college in 2018. I was placed in a number of the remedial courses, and I totally felt the shame and dread of, my peers are another place beyond me, but I knew what my potential was, and I like to think I've realized it in part, but I think, prior to AB 705, I think that is the experience for like lots of students, is that shame and that realization that they could be moving on and fulfilling their potential, but instead are kind of locked behind that, having to deal with that shame, that stigma, and the realization that they're really, in a large sense, wasting their time and money and not attaining any sort of credit. And I actually can think of one of my close friends at Folsom Lake College who was even farther behind than me. And once AB 705 kind of went live at my college, they had been there for years, and as soon as AB 705 went live, they graduated within a semester or two, I want to say. Because that was the only barrier for them as in terms of moving on. So those are my experiences.
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute. No, I totally feel what my colleague said. Yeah. For me, it was the same kind of. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Sorry, it's bugging out. All right. For me, it's kind of the same idea. I really internalized being bad at math and English for the most part. Just, I guess the school system in general, like, it kind of makes you kind of like trust the institution in a way. And it's just like, if the institution tells you you're here, well, then I guess you're there. And then, for me, I'd always been placed in like kind of like not the worst classes, but they'd place me like lower than I usually thought I'd be, or they had a lot of doubts, I felt like, in my academic ability. And I really internalized that. So when I first started back up at the institution at the City College of San Francisco, because I was over there, when I took the placement test, I was just like, oh, what if I get like really low, or what if I fail the test and I have to take all these classes, prior to going to City College. It already had a reputation of like having students there for like years at a time, just taking the same like remedial courses that someone might have taken in high school. So I remember when I started off taking the placement test, I was like, no, I didn't want to go through this again. I didn't want to go through and have to go and complete classes that I already had finished in high school prior. And I doubted my ability a lot too, to even complete those classes. But, I think that's just what it was. Just a lot of doubt, just like coming from a school system. It's just, you kind of internalize just that feeling of like, oh, you're not going to make it because you're not smart enough to, or you don't have the ability to make it in that way. And when I heard about AB 705, it took me a long time to accept. Well, not a long time. It didn't take me too much of a long time, but it did take me like a minute to accept, because I was like, students kind of need these classes to get ahead, but just going through it again, like, and thinking about my capability, I was just, I got put into classes that I didn't necessarily feel like I had the ability to make it through. And just with the right support, I was able to do it. So it's just all about providing that support and just ensuring that like students get the ability and opportunity to take those classes and that they're not closed off. I was cut off from a lot of classes in high school because they just didn't necessarily thought I could make it onto there. And, they test your ability. And so, when you get tested, it's not a very good way to take a student's capability, right? So, you know, the AB 705 kind of revolutionized that thought for me. It's like, if you put a student in this class, they're going to do their best to strive because that's what they need to do. You know, they're going to, as long as you provide that support and those resources, that they can make it. You know, it kind of changed my idea of what it was, you know. Yeah.
Thank you for that, students. It's always so important to hear directly from our students, hear their voices and their experiences, and what equitable placement has meant for them. Of course, another very important party in this process, central party, are our faculty, right? Our faculty who design curriculum and ultimately are those champions and those heroes that open up pathways for our students. So I want to pose this next question to our faculty representatives. How has this changed, the policy change of AB 705 and equitable placement? In your view, how has that opened pathways for your students? And how have you had to shift your role or shift your practices to accommodate the new students you're now seeing in your classrooms?
So I'll start, and then when I'm done, I ask something of Jeffrey. So, so right now, most, if not all, students can enroll in transfer level courses in English and mathematics. Some with support, others may not need support. If they choose, they can get the support. English generally has one pathway. It's the English composition. And so not a lot has changed there. It's English composition with support. Yet math generally has two pathways, and it is still a work in progress. Often students receive two placements in math. One is for a SLAM pathway, that's statistics and liberal arts mathematics, which generally gives students access to a transfer level mathematics course or quantitative reasoning. But the other pathway is a BSTEM, business, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics pathway, which could include placement in an intermediate algebra course, which is one level below. And that also is the student has options, and it depends a lot on students' background, and we work with the students. So with all of the colleges implementing guided pathways, there's more opportunity right now to support and provide students with their options and guide them to enrolling in the course that best suits their self-determined educational goals. Not us telling them what their educational goals are, but hearing from them to find out what would best meet their pathways, and then giving them choice. English as a second language is just starting down this work. They're beginning to implement, and we have been supporting faculty there as well. Today, there is more support than ever to provide high-touch support so that students can determine their own goals, timelines, and programs. Taking this time to truly hear our students, their interests, and their educational goals. What is working for them? What improvements need to be made is so important. This has required disciplined faculty to work very closely with our counseling faculty so that pathways are clearly defined for students and so they understand all of the options available to them. After students receive their options, their placements, they can make their course choices for enrollment. And I'm guessing Jeffrey has some great examples and ideas moving forward.
Well, yeah, certainly. I would say that we have had different colleges doing things with non-credit to fully, maximize those opportunities, and also I think another area where faculty are very anxious to receive support for is to really get into dual enrollment with it's in some kind of coordinated fashion to really help students, be prepared, better prepared, and maybe shorten their pathway to completion even sooner, like middle college, for example. So those are some of the things that are out there. We also have supplemental instruction and more. We're receiving greater institutional support for than we had before. So I think that's been part of the challenge, is coupling the institutional supports that had been, recognized and had been desired, going way back, right? I mean, we hadn't fully funded, a number of things, and I think colleges and districts are doing some things that maybe they hadn't done before. That's been very important to that experience. I know for faculty, it has also been very important in terms of how to deal with the emotional challenges. I'll be upfront about it. We've had it's been very difficult for a number of our English and math faculty to have a large number of students who are not succeeding. So it's like it's been kind of like schizophrenic. More students succeeding, through the because there are more students, right? And so you have, like more on the throughput side, and of course, that's always wonderful. Because one of the beautiful things about AB 705 was getting rid of the misplacement that so many of our students, as we were hearing a moment ago, were facing for students who were placed in courses that they didn't need, and can be very demoralizing and discouraging. So that piece was great. The challenge, of course, is that while we provided opportunity on that end, at our college, part of our implementation had involved from a directive that we no longer offer a certain course, like the course I was referring to earlier, we no longer offer. And so for those students who seek out the preparation that we used to be able to provide, they're not. We're not able to do it, I'll be frank, but we can do a lot of other things, and so that's ramping up, and so that's been really good. I mentioned the SI, a lot more support in our learning centers, and again, there's still more we can do with non-credit, so that's been really, good. So it feels really schizophrenic. It's like, okay, we have areas where we can really be excited about, but bottom line, again, based on my activist roots, I'm always going to be concerned about students that we are leaving out of the equation, particularly because at least from what I've been able to see in the preliminary data, it looks like we're talking about Black and brown students as well. So it's like, how do we still so this is a difficult nut that we have to crack. At the same time, again, rethinking pedagogy, instilling growth mindset in our approach. So there's a number of different things that I see happening, particularly redesigning our curriculum from an anti-racist lens. So we have that going on as well. It's been really good stuff. So like I said, a little schizophrenic here, but that's what I would also add to the equation in terms of, and there's much to do on that front, right? We have cultural curriculum audit that's just been launched, and of course, this isn't about singing to the choir. So we need to institutionalize that, and we need to be able to look at the data so that those faculty could really benefit from that support, and their students benefit from them getting that support. We want to make sure to be pushing that out, those opportunities to look at the data and to learn about anti-racism, to learn about how to be culturally responsive, to learn about how to redo your assignments, your syllabi, all of that. Yeah, so again, I do hope we get to receive that institutional support moving forward, because I really do think that we're on the cusp of really creating the change that many of us have been involved with for generations. That our young students here are leading the call and say, "Hey, no longer can it simply be talk." Yeah, so I'm sorry, I think I probably went on a little bit too far.
No, thank you for that, Jeffrey, and thank you, Jenny, for that. Before we move on to our administrators, just want to give the students a heads up. There's two good questions for you in the Q&A that I'll ask you live after we hear from our administrators. So starting now to Dr. Vega-Lacerna, Dr. Dedeboy, both our CIO and CSSO representatives, and your perspective on equitable placement as administrators. What did it require of you as a leader to facilitate this overhaul of policy and practice on your campuses?
I guess I'll start. And although I represent the CIOs in my president role as a CIO president, this question is specific about my campus. So I'm going to focus it on my experience at my campus. And I want to preface that by saying College of the Sequoias, we have been highlighted in several reports as one of the colleges that completely eliminated pre-transfer level math and English. In addition, our guided self-placement guidelines were less restrictive than what was required or guide, the outlines in the legislation. So what did that take? It took a lot of conversation. It took a lot of collaboration between the faculty, the curriculum, the administrators, the counselors. It took a lot of collaboration. We created a task force that had representatives of, students, faculty, administrators, technology. There were just every aspect of the campus, marketing, student services, everyone, our tutorial centers were on this task force that met regularly and continues to meet as we're moving forward and assessing where we are. I think it also took a lot of professional development. We provided the resources, and we asked, had to do a lot of training because as several people have mentioned, it took some retraining and refocusing for the faculty and for our administrators. So we had a lot of training. And it wasn't easy. I'm going to tell you, one of our faculty members in math is renowned at the chancellor's office because he called everybody at the chancellor's office to argue with the data, and everyone knows him. But I'm glad he did that because he was the division chair for our math department at that time, and him questioning the data and questioning the information was able to bring that information back. I remember there was one day that the president and I walked across campus pre-COVID and sat down with our math faculty and had a conversation with them. And in the end, all of our faculty, math and English, we all decided jointly that, this legislation was happening and we were going to step ahead of it and make the decisions for our campus and for what was best for our students. And I'm really proud of our faculty having taken a less restrictive approach on the GPA guidelines and the course guidelines for both math and English. So, but it takes constant assessment too. So we're actually on our third iteration of our math sequence. We assess it, we analyze it, we revise it, we look at the data, we talk to students, we talk to our learning resource folks in our tutorial centers, we talk with the counselors, and get feedback. And we have not only changed the guided self-placement information for our students, but we also have added some courses and adjusted courses where we needed to. And so right now, in fact, our faculty are in the process of developing a course for career technical education that would count as the transfer level math for, or the graduation requirement for folks who are getting, our students who are getting their AA degree. So I think it has required us to be very flexible with our co-requisite models and implementation. It's required funding. We've had to create avenues for discussion and professional development. And from an administrative perspective, creating those avenues, providing the funding, providing the support, providing the professional development that we needed. And I think it's been really successful. The last thing I want to say before I hand it over to my colleague Zab is that we also embedded this into our strategic plan. So our strategic plan has 4 areas of growth, success, equity, and sustainability. And everything about passing transfer level math and English, graduating students, getting them through is part of our objectives in our strategic plan. So our entire colleges embraces those objectives. And so I'll hand it over for Zab for his perspective.
Thank you. And Dr. Lowe, I really appreciate the question being framed as one of leadership, because this definitely took a lot of leadership by many different people, both at the system level, the chancellor's office, but also on campuses as well. I mean, leadership isn't just doing and implementing a new policy or a new guideline. It is the process of actually inspiring one another and empowering your teams. And honestly, people are remarkable if given space and motivation, they will never fail to impress. And implementing this policy was not simple. It was not easy, and it was not fast. And it had its roots in discussions that the CSSOs and many other professionals in our fields were having, starting way back in 2014, 15, 16, that our system of doing testing and then finding an arbitrary placement in a course, typically in a 2 or 3 levels below college level, was not working. There was plenty of data out there. There was plenty of research about that. At Bakersfield College, we had begun the process of using multiple measures, and that was the first version of moving away from a strict placement system. And we started using that several years before AB 705 was introduced. And so our faculty, our counselors, our department chairs, they all understood the concepts and the importance of using those types of multiple measures and not just relying upon a test. And we had plenty of discussion based upon the data that students placed in course levels below college level had a very small chance to get to that college level course. So despite that, it surprised me that it seemed to many people on our campus that AB 705 just completely dismantled and overhauled policy and practice that we had in place for forever, it seems. So even though I felt that we had a head start, it was not simple, it was not easy, and it was not fast. But what it is equitable. And it is definitely worth it because it has produced results. So AB 705, it required us as leaders to dig deep, to be willing to understand that such change comes with big responsibilities, and highlighted the need for significant strategic communication. So I felt that at Bakersfield College, we led with information. We provided data, both qualitative and quantitative. We displayed openness to ideas. We owned and we examined our prevailing systemic issues, in terms of barriers that we unconsciously create, for example. And we built the capacity for endurance because, again, let's be honest, this was not always a popular policy. All of these sort of worked together to create an intentional and yet thoughtful implementation at BC. Leaders don't blame the tools that they are given. Leaders work to sharpen them. So initially, when the results were not what we had expected, which was halfway through our first implementation, we became innovative, we sharpened our tools, and we did exactly what Jennifer just described, where we kept assessing, reassessing, and then resetting our plans for AB 705. We empowered our deans, we empowered our faculty to sort of dream big, find solutions. In English, for example, when the first data came out, the numbers were better for our students of color, but they were not what we had hoped for. And the dean and the faculty could have shaken their heads and they could have, blamed the rapid implementation of AB 705. But we have a fighting spirit at the home of the Renegades at Bakersfield College. And we engaged with faculty and students and we listened to their concerns, and it resulted in significant gains. We saw the same thing that Jennifer described. We saw shifts for faculty and for support areas. We had significantly more students taking transfer level classes, which meant we needed more classes and more teachers, and then more supports, and obviously more creativity. And I'm proud to say we did not increase class sizes. And we simply shifted the types of courses that we were offering. We no longer offered most remedial courses, And we were able to absorb the time, the classrooms, the faculty into transfer level offerings across our curriculum. And so I'm absolutely thrilled. It required a lot of homework. It required a lot of teamwork, and it required us to be strategic about things like scheduling. So as we shift our efforts to prioritize those transfer level courses, we had to shift our supports. We had to shift our scheduling. We had to shift where our faculty homes were. But that's what this is about.
Thank you very much to both of you, Jennifer and Zav, for that. Before we get back to some of our pre-planned questions, I do want to jump into the Q&A and pose some of the questions that were there. So students, 2 questions coming back at you as students. One question was really asking, once you had this greater opportunity for your English and math classes and getting into transfer level, did that shift your plan, your educational plan in some sort of way? Did getting that access sort of shift the way you were thinking about your own trajectory or the plans that you had set for your major or transfer?
For me, it didn't change my educational goals. It just made it, for me, it was just like I could see me completing them. So yeah, I'm still a political science major and I'm still on that trajectory.
Andrew or Christian, want to chime in on this one?
Yeah, sure thing. So I myself, I took my remedial coursework and then continued on. It didn't necessarily have a super direct impact. I had the wherewithal to take my remedial coursework the summer before. I enrolled in my first semester, so it didn't affect really my plan, but kind of speaking on behalf of students and some of my friends at FLC too as well, it directly impacted their trajectory. They were thinking of dropping out. And something that's really insidious about the remedial coursework is that you can't move on until you do it. But if you continually fail to do it, it threatens then your satisfactory academic progress, potentially your financial aid. And from there, it becomes kind of a swim or sink situation where you have to do it this time. And there is an incredible amount of stress and anxiety to that end on that. But for those students, like I said, once it went live, I mean, it dissolved that anxiety, that I think that fear. And I went from seeing my friend and our student government office hours, just this kind of sullen look on his face, just struggling through his math homework. And now being like, I'm going to graduate, I'm moving on to Sac State. Like it was like a light had been, it opened up a whole new world for my friend. So trajectory changing, life changing for sure.
Yeah, there you go. Mm-hmm.
My bad. I keep on forgetting that, despite the fact I've been on Zoom for like a year now, it's like you always forget the mute button, But yeah, just it's kind of about the same, It just kind of, well, for me, I had finished my classes prior to AB 705 kind of coming out. Like, I already had taken the trigonometry, which I'd taken in high school, but it did motivate me to want to help people out more, especially in like classes, and just because, there's still not too much about the support for those classes. So ended up taking up tutoring in English. Ended up trying to, even my aunt, like I absolutely get so upset sometimes because she's like 50 and she's working on getting her degree. And so I was just like, oh, okay, let me help you out. And so I'm taking her courses, and the school that she's going to, they don't have like an AB 705 to like go through to the just top of the level classes. But I'm just like, why are you taking these classes? You know, you don't have to do this anymore. City College has it like this, where you just, get into the college level courses. But she's like, no, my school is doing it like this. So I'm like, okay. So what do you call it? Yeah, just doing her, it just kind of made me want to be more of a support for students, just wanted me to go out there and kind of just, provide something, despite being just one person, like I worked out of a few resource centers, one being student supporting students in City College, and the other one prior being this group called Vita. So just that egged me to do that, because I do understand the struggle of taking courses and then just being like, how do you even do this? Or like seeing questions where you didn't even cover them in class, and it could be horrendous.
All right, another question for the students, and then I'll tee up our faculty and staff that there's a question coming your way in the Q&A. But another question here, this attendee first, students, thanks you all for sharing that your stories were very moving. And their question is, what is the best way that campuses can support students when you are in a transfer level course, but feel a little bit unprepared for the course expectations? So how do you feel about some of the current models around co-requisite supports, which can, come in the form of co-requisite classes or embedded tutors? Do you feel like those additional units can have a negative impact on you financially? So general question to students about how do you support students well when they're in transfer level, and what do you think about some of the current models of co-requisite support?
Personally, I think, well, not for everything's personally, really, because, you're talking from yourself. My bad. I'm sorry. It's a long day. What do you call it? But I think there needs to be more experimentation with developing a lot of different co-requisite models. Embedded tutoring is cool, but I think the way the curriculum is taught needs to I've been to this California acceleration project for CAP, and they came out with a abundant of different kind of ideas to where students are supposed to they're teaching students, and then they're also saying, hey, but this is the context behind this. This is why we do it like this. And then they'll go forward with the lesson, and then they'll be like, oh, so you see this right here, you could do it like this way, and then they'll explain it about kind of the historical content to that. Like when it comes to math, oh yeah, the Pythagorean theorem, and then they'll go onto another subset and they'll be like, hey, but this is why they do it like this. I think AB 705 has been kind of stigmatized in a way of just being fast tracking to college level courses and just doing it like they've done it for decades. It's really, I feel, just a time of experimentation, of just trying out different new ideas of how to teach a class, maybe instead of, trying a bit more with the group work and just, using that, having students support other students, so that's my idea about it. It's just there needs to be an abundance of different ways aside from a co-requisite.
Yeah, I agree with you totally about needing more experimentation. And I'm a huge fan of an embedded tutor. It worked for me. And also what Chris said previously, the work groups, making sure that, students in the room are building kind of a small community amongst, maybe 4 or 5 folks getting together, study groups, because that's what really holds people accountable and keeps people engaged and showing up. And I know it's hard when you're a professor and you got 100 students, or you're serving so many people. It's hard to build that rapport with everyone, but that also helps as well. Being seen and, feeling heard really helped me accomplish everything I needed in my classes.
Andrew, do you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, sure. For me, I'm a logical guy. I like kind of breaking out the choices that I'm presented with and really weighing the benefits and downsides. And for me, what I'd tell students is, I think on one hand you had the status quo, which was, okay, you're going to take 1, 2, maybe even 3 classes that are remedial. to get you to the transfer level coursework. So maybe altogether you might have to take, anywhere from 1 to 4 classes to be at a transfer level. And I compare that to the new reform, which is going immediately to the transfer level coursework, but with all these extra resources. And the way I think about it is, is that student, do you feel more unprepared and more anxious about doing the former rather than the latter? And I think most people would pick the latter. And to Christian's point, this still doesn't mean that we're trying to like fast track students and get them. I mean, in a sense, yes, we are, but that still doesn't mean the student has to. It still means the student has to do the work, has to meet the learning outcomes as prescribed by the course, as taught by the instructor. But I think there is a sense of ease that comes to mind when the student is faced with, okay, you have to do this, which is horrible, or this, which is still going to be really challenging, but we're working as hard as we can as a college, as faculty, to get you here with these extra resources. And so I think it's not a question of, are you going to be anxious? Will the extra units be a little bit more difficult? I think yes, to some extent. Yeah, we're not going to lie to you, but it's so much better than the alternative, than the inequitable alternative. I know I keep going back to my friend's story because it really changed his kind of trajectory. But he's taken that deal 10 out of 10 times, and so the advice that I'd kind of give is, I would go into it, realizing that you have these extra resources, relying on the tutor making space in your schedule to engage with that tutor and with the instructor, if it's a co-requisite, and making sure that you're getting it done this time. But altogether, still so much better than the alternative, which is so much worse. So that's the kind of peace of mind that I might share with a student who is, anxious about this. That it's going to be challenging, but this is the best option, and we have the resources in place to support you. And you should charge on ahead and know that we're pushing and following behind you.
Thank you for that. Students have a question here now for our faculty and administrators. At your colleges or in your departments, how have you managed individuals who have been resistant to AB 705 or resistant to the changes on your campus? So whoever wants to jump in there. Go ahead, Jenny.
I'll jump in. So, I haven't managed it so much on my college or my campus, but I've been working with it statewide. And what we find is that we try to find a common ground that everybody can agree on, some foundational principles, because we have to believe that faculty have come into this work because they care about their students. They care about teaching. They care that their students want to learn. And the beauty of democracy is that we all have different opinions. And through all those different opinions, we come out with something better. And so we embrace the democratic process in moving forward. So come up with the common principles and then see where you can move forward in that sense. Allow the cranky voices to be heard and then move on from that. And it's what's so important is not to point fingers, not to place blame and say you're right or you're wrong and I'm right. Or, of course, we'd like everyone to say you're right and I'm wrong, but that doesn't always happen. But it's kind of an inviting in, and you're not going to win for everyone. But you once you can move people a little bit, then it starts and momentum begins. So the foundational principles, respecting each other, trusting each other, and inviting people in to share is what we're finding is changing people's minds and showing them data and allowing them to ask questions about it.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in on this as well. I from East Los Angeles College. That's what you see behind me, my background. And it's part of a 9-college district. And so I do know that I did hear after the initial memo had come out, it was that summer 2018 regarding English and math, spring, I forget, right? I do remember that a number of my sister colleges, I think it seemed like they were sitting on their hands a little bit more, like wait and see, unsure. At our college, we moved rather quickly on the placement model in the memo, on even archiving quite a bit of courses. I believe we were the first in our college in the district. A lot of concern, of course, went along with it. I wouldn't call it resistance because, again, these changes I just described were being implemented, but a lot of concern, and that concern is still there in terms of data. So that's one of the challenges is getting good data to find out, how do we make sure we reach all of our students, right? That's really where a lot of the faculty are coming from at my campus. So it's not an issue of resistance as much as how do we continue to improve our system. So this was one thing that happened, but what about those other students, that are not making it through, even with the extra resources that we're now able to bring to bear? And also, there's the concern: will we continue to have these resources? There's a heavy fear that those resources will be pulled back on. And so the concern about exclusionary practices is, I think, at the heart of what I'm hearing at my campus. I think now the rest of the colleges in our district are at that point too, where it's like, okay, let's be asking the question. That's one of the things I learned from a guy at a Pathways conference I went to, from folks that were from other states. You can learn so much by looking at those students who aren't making it through, right? So we've done away with the old misplacement problem. So as has been the problems with that have been well articulated here today. So to me that's the old debate. The new challenge is learning, right, from what is working, with more students in the transfer pathway receiving these resources, and really students there's such a diversity of it. So that's one of the cool things I think that we're doing is we're not assuming that all students are fitting in one category. For some, embedded tutoring; for others, the co-requisite model or support courses. Trying to meet students where they're at is really key. And then, of course, and asking the question, getting the data, hard data on what explains those students who aren't making it through, even with all of that.
Right. Do we have any others of our faculty or administrators want to jump in on that question? All right. Well, I am looking at the time and seeing we are quickly running out of time. This went by very quickly. So just thinking about sort of closing remarks then, as we prepare to transition. As you all have talked, we've really hit our final sort of core question, which was what's working, what's not working. You've all hit on that in different ways. So final question, open to anyone who wants to respond. As you think about this change of equitable placement, what it's meant for the community college system, what is working, how it's been beneficial, and the work still yet to do. As you think about that, we may have probably a combination of administrators and faculty and students in the audience. Just a closing word, right? Sort of a charge to our system as we think about equitable placement and the work still to be done. What would you want to share with your colleagues or with our system as sort of a closing word, a sort of charge of action to continue to move forward with equitable placement? Zav, I see you came off mute. Do you want to jump in?
Sure. I just want to highlight what Jenny said earlier. I think that there is going to be an important element of how do we build trust? How do we have those important conversations? And how do we critically examine what the results are? Because at least for Bakersfield College, I can tell you that this works. The rates of completion for our African-American students, for our Hispanic and Latino students, it's double and triple what it used to be. And so the rates work, and compared to where we used to be when students were just not likely to ever get to a college level course, I think that I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be a part of a system where we were able to take bold leadership and take this thing on. But there is still more work to be done, because we will always need to improve, to tweak, to find the best way to schedule and to provide the supports, the tutoring, the supplemental instruction, and what are the timings for those? How are they scheduled into the system? And are they really effective? I mean, those are things that we will have to continually work upon and are important.
Jenny, feel free to jump in. Then Jeffrey.
I have some closing words. I think we should really look at the successes that have been taking place with the efforts to implement AB 705. There are a number of resources that have been brought to bear, and it's really difficult sometimes to ascertain the effectiveness of different types of resources. But I think that's so important that we really look at how we institutionalize this. One of the things that I think we realize that with AB 705 and other reforms that have been going into effect recently is that we have the capacity as community colleges to really care for our students all the way through, right? Their journey with us. And now that we have more students at the transfer level, let's think about that. Means that we are in a prime position to support them in ways that we hadn't done before. We also hear about comparisons to the privates or to the 4 years. There is that sort of care that takes place with their new students and the supports all the way through. And I think that's some of that level of care is what we need to be incorporated into what we do, and also to those who in our community that we are not reaching. And I'm not only referring to those who have been discouraged and have not succeeded and have left, but I'm also talking about the many more students, potential students out there. Right, because our community is filled with, at least I'm thinking my community, we have a low adult participation rate. It's filled with folks who really what we offer is it's a gold mine of opportunity for them.
Jenny, I saw we lost you, but you came back in.
Yeah, you did lose me. You did. So I'm not quite sure what's been said, but I can maybe fill in the gaps, even though I don't know where they are, but you can help me out. So speaking of gaps, I mean, we have to acknowledge equity gaps persist, and there are many reasons why they persist. This doesn't mean we're not doing good things now, but it means we can see them and we have the opportunity, we have the support that we need to address them now and not wait till later. More students are finding success, but there are more students, especially our Black and Brown socioeconomically disadvantaged students, that are receiving substandard transcript notations in these transfer level courses. We don't want to wait and let it happen semester after semester. So let's find out from our students why this is happening, and let's address it and figure out how we can help them, how we can move forward. I really appreciate the support we have from the Board of Governors, the support we have from the legislature in addressing these now. So looking at things that aren't going well doesn't mean we're doing a bad thing. Looking at it means we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. Celebrate our successes, acknowledge the areas for improvement, and act on it right away. And that's what the Academic Senate is really pushing for. And it's not about pointing fingers, about blaming people. It's about working together and talk to our students. That's what I've heard today. Talk to our students, talk to the ones that are successful, and then talk to the ones that we can see need help. What do they think will help them? So thank you.
Any others want to give just a closing remark?
Yeah, I can say something. I just, I was at the ACCJC symposium yesterday and got to hear Dr. Estela Ben-Simon talk about AB 705. And she talked about it as an example of corrective justice and anti-racist policy. And she talked about an anti-racist project like AB 705 leading to anti-racist outcomes. She said remedial education was not intended to be racist, but its outcomes were in fact racist. And AB 705 is corrective justice because it has the potential of producing anti-racist outcomes. And she said that she thinks it's potential because it's not going to happen until we're very specific about how we implement it, as well as the kind of professional development that we're providing to faculty and staff. So I wrote down that quote from her yesterday because that was perfect to share today. So what do we need to do? I think it's critical that we look at what Jeffrey talked about the students. We've got increased throughput, but what about the students who aren't getting through? We have to, we also have more students failing. So we have to address that and talk to our students, look at the data, find out what is happening in there. We need to review the co-requisite risk support, see how it's working. We need to analyze the colleges that still have pre-transfer level classes. How is that working? And what are some of the reasons for that? And collaborate with each other, with the academic senate, with the chancellor's office, with our students, with student services officers, and with the CIOs to address those issues. I think we need to outreach and support students who have failed or dropped out of math and English to re-engage them, re-enroll them, and support them. And again, like Dr. Ben-Simon said, continued professional development with an equity focus is critical, and we need to continue to address ongoing systemic barriers for student success.
Thank you for that, Jennifer. Students, do any of you want to give a final word or charge to our system?
I just want to say Dr. Jennifer said it beautifully. Everything you said. I'm echoing that.
Awesome. Well, I know our time. Go ahead, Christian.
Oh, okay, for sure. No, I have to really appreciate the attitudes of all of you. Be like, yeah, it's great, especially Zav. Like what you said there, I was like, whoa, like to hear like that was beautiful what you said, So that's really dope. Aside from that, though, yeah, I would have to agree. Like, I think as community colleges, we're supposed to be serving the community, and even as a student, I feel like just in general that I have a responsibility to my community, and to not go forth and help other people out, I just feel like would be a failure, not only to myself, but just a failure to be part of that community, So for me, just like stepping up and doing this work, it's not necessarily like it's something that I'm passionate about because, at the end of the day, we all affect each other as people. And those of us in our community who are striving to do better and just can't make it, like they could always find support within other people. And I really appreciate your attitudes about like, if we're failing, why are we failing? About analyzing. We're not blaming a policy. We're not blaming anybody. We are just trying to do better. And I could really appreciate that.
Right. Andrew, you get the closing word here.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say, I think we're all very much on the right page, to what Jenny said about, seeing where we're doing good, but where we could do better. But I want to strike maybe on a slightly different kind of tone and as kind of a response, but also just kind of as part of my call to action. Jennifer, you had that amazing quote. AB 705 was an anti-racist act, an act of corrective justice. And I firmly believe that. But I just want to quantify to what extent. And to me, I don't think we're at an extent to which it is truly as corrective as it could be, as anti-racist as it could be. A significant number of colleges still offer more remedial coursework than transfer level co-requisite courses. And despite knowing, by the numbers that students are more successful in those transfer level the coursework with appropriate supports. And to me, this seems to me that we still need more urgency in what we're doing. I think, as I said before in other kind of statements about AB 705, that we've come a long way since the 90s and the lawsuit that was filed against our system for inequitably placing students of color, disproportionately impacting them. And yet I think we still have so much further to go from there. And I think many people see AB 705 as a stopping point. But by the numbers, we have a long hill to climb still. But I am incredibly glad and incredibly grateful that the folks on this call today have demonstrated such a profound commitment to students to figuring out what is working and what is not, and identifying actionable steps to get us there. And that means all the world, I think, to the system and to students and to all the partners who are standing by, watching, and supporting. So thank you so much.
Thank you for that, Andrew. That was the perfect segue, Andrew. So as we prepare to close, really towards the point that Andrew was just making, what do we do next, right? And how do we make sure that we're fully implementing AB 705 and fully actualizing equitable placement? I just want to summarize some of the things that our panelists have said today about what we do next and how we get there. We heard about the importance of leadership, and leaders inspiring and empowering the rest of their campus to do this work. We heard about the importance of intentional and thoughtful implementation, that this should be sewn into and embedded into strategic planning and be a part of the core of what colleges are doing. We heard that this is equity work and that equity work is not easy or fast, but it is definitely worth it. We heard about the importance of institutional investment, right? This is not going to happen by will alone. There has to be an investment by the institution in professional development, providing faculty and students the resources they need, engaging in strategic communication. And we heard about the importance of this opportunity to innovate, to be creative, and to really research what's working, what's not, and leading with the data. We heard from our faculty around the faculty supports that are needed, professional development around culturally responsive pedagogy, understanding how to differentiate education, and that particular focus on our BIPOC students, so where we continue to see those gaps, right? That while all boats are rising, we do continue to see those gaps, and we need to support our faculty in understanding what their role is in that process in reaching those students and closing those gaps. And then we also heard, I like to close with that student perspective about the change this has been for our students. We heard very clearly from our students that they look to our institutions as places of authority, and that when the authority tells them what they can and cannot do, they have internalized those messages and internalized previously that doubt. So we heard today about the importance of pairing high expectations with high support. We heard today about the importance of us doing all of this with an ethos of care and concern for our students. And ultimately, what we have learned, I believe, through the equitable placement reform effort is that students should not have to prove that they are ready for our colleges. It is the role and responsibility of our colleges to be ready to serve all our students well. So I want to thank all of our panelists for their time. Thank you for the work that you're doing out in the field to do exactly that, to serve all of our students well. And thank you to all of those who across our system that have really leaned into this opportunity for us to dismantle structural barriers of racism, of classism, to provide greater opportunities for our students. And we at the Chancellor's Office look forward to continuing to support the system and exactly what our panelists talked about today, continuing to highlight those promising practices where things are going well, and then digging into those areas that still need improvement so that we can see the full vision of what equitable placement was meant to achieve for our system. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Martinez to close us out and transition us.
Thank you, Dr. Lowe, and thank you again to all of our panelists. Definitely always a pleasure to be in community with you and in agreement that this is a journey that we're on and we're all on it together. So it is nice to see and hear the stories, as Dr. Lowe said earlier, as that we get to know all of you, and just those personal stories I think matter. So thank you for sharing them and for being vulnerable and sharing those today. So in transition, next slide, please. This is our time for networking. We do want to give you an opportunity to continue the conversation. So we've developed 3 questions that you see on this slide that you may consider as you go into your networking time for discussion. Number 1, how has this change in policy opened pathways for students on your campus? Secondly, what challenges and successes have you experienced while implementing these changes? And then lastly, what else can be done to support student access to and success in gateway courses? So hopefully you gained a lot, you've heard a lot today, but I think there's more that you can gain also from connecting with some of your colleagues in the system. So next slide, please. So in order to do that, to go into the breakout rooms, you will need to return to the Summit Agenda webpage. We'll also post the link in the chat. In case you don't want to do that, you can just click on that link. You will be placed into a breakout room with approximately 10 of your colleagues to begin your discussions. And then lastly, please note that these breakout rooms will close at around 4:05. So you may want to start wrapping up maybe 5 minutes before. And after that, that will conclude today's webinar. And we just hope that you will join us again next week. That will be the last webinar of this series that will actually be discussing teaching and learning, innovations in teaching and learning. So again, thank you for joining us today. And let's go ahead and transition to our networking time.